a question for you, Sarah. So you mentioned that financing an emergency smart grid is a bit of a challenge. So what do you think are some of the solutions to this? And do you think that they could potentially be community owned, or do you think that that would be too expensive?
I think that's pretty much, that sort of applies to all microgrids. So there are like some other projects I've been involved in, and the question is always how do you finance it, and how do you sort of distribute ownership? And it doesn't always mean that if the community owns it, that's the best solution. So I think that's sort of part of the business model, and it really is up to the community to decide it and to actually bring in different options. And it's basically part of a puzzle, because you can go different pathways. And so if the community owns and finances it, then that's a good way, but it might not be possible, and there might be other options. So I think there's no, it's quite complex, and I think it's really up to the community. I think in this case, they're quite lucky that they have the Victorian government behind them, and the Latrobe Valley Authority is really they're really a great organization. So there will be some public funding for this, but yeah, I think it would be quite expensive for the community to finance this on their own. But there could be some skills, or someone could upskill and then take over those maintenance, any sort of practicalities.
Great, thank you. And yeah, you're right, usually there's never any one size fits all sort of solution. And so yeah, obviously it's up to the communities. Yeah, that's great, thank you. So Ian, Michael was interested in hearing a bit more about your business model for Beehive. Mick, did you want to ask for the?
Yeah, yes, I was just sort of interested in how the Beehive sort of revenue model works from a sustainability perspective, as in business sustainability perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So people subscribe to villages. We'll subscribe around Australia for $5 a month. And then the idea with the sharing of items on villages is that it's free sharing amongst neighbours. So something like Hey Fritz would be one of the enterprises that could be set up around villages, because that's a different service where you're looking at higher end things like I can't wait to borrow a chocolate fountain. The way the business model works is we're a cooperative, so people can also become a member of the cooperative and help with shared governance. They subscribe to the villages platform, and then other cooperative enterprises that are built around villages. They're obviously a pay for service type thing. So you'd pay by the hour to hire a car, and a small part of that income stream would come back to the central Beehive organisation to improve the software, help incubate the next cooperatives. So obviously, if we can get 5,000 members in Bendigo, that's $350,000, that we can run an organisation with, which is a nice small organisation. If we can get 10,000 members, it's even better. So we think that's pretty financially sustainable. We're gonna open up the platform around Australia from February, and people will subscribe, and some of that money will go back to local people to pay them to set up their own Beehive cooperative, and some of it will come back to Bendigo in the short term so that we can improve the software. So we're then looking at setting up some sort of structure that is separate to all the places, that is really like an organisation that exists to help local places set up their own Beehive cooperative. So yeah, that's how it works. Obviously, the more enterprises you've got in a local place built around villages, the more financially sustainable it is.
Mhm.
But in the short term, we think the Villages platform is enough to kick us off and get us going.
It's an awesome initiative. And have you been full time on it, or just on the while you're working as well?
Good question. I've had my own business for 15 years now, where I help organisations become ecologically sustainable. But that's been going on a curve from the top down to the bottom as Beehive has gone up like this. So we're still all volunteering to build Beehive, and we have been for 4 years. There's been a couple of consulting gigs that have come in, which have provided some pay, but we're hoping to get to that point really soon. But yeah, I've just been working less and less on my other work and more on Beehive, especially over the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. So it's been a big commitment to throw ourselves into it. But people have often said, you know, it's right, what you're doing is frightening. I was like, well, it's not as frightening as collapse of civilization. It's not as frightening as climate change. It's not as frightening as all the billionaires and all the homelessness. And it's not as frightening as 70% of all species disappearing from the planet in the 50-year period. So yeah, we've thrown ourselves in to have a crack at getting it going.
Awesome.
Fantastic, and here. So I guess we've got 5 minutes left. I'll just throw one last question out there. So start with you, Mick. So you did mention that one of your challenges was around insurance. So were there any other sort of challenges that you faced in sort of setting up Hey Fritz, and maybe just any wins as well? I mean, obviously getting it off the ground is a huge win, but yeah, so challenges and successes. And then if, yeah, we want to wrap up with that. So if each person wants to have a bit of a crack at that question.
Initially, I was a little bit worried during COVID, as we were sort of heading into opening up, and I was worried about my perception of sort of going around and the importance of talking to people face to face. But in the end, the remote communication, which has been stronger, has actually been really good, because we could reach out more broadly. So it turned out to be good anyway. So so it hasn't really been too many other key challenges, I don't think. No.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah?
So yeah, I had a similar question around COVID for the both of you. Just, I can imagine during COVID, people spent more time at home and also more time maybe in front of the computer. So they might come across those sides, but there might be concerns around borrowing other people's things. And so yeah, I was just wondering if you've seen sort of like more interest on your website, but maybe less demand, or requesting.
We had to put a COVID,
has to do with hygiene and.
Yeah, we put a COVID safe plan in pretty quick, and it's pretty simple. Like, and in fact, it in a way it keeps people out of the crowds, because they don't need to go down to the big shopping centres. So people, instead of going to buy stuff, have just had stuff. We don't do like the curb drop off, where you just drop it off and sort of take off. But we get people to place it and then step back, and then the person, and they disinfect before they borrow the stuff, and then we encourage people to give it a quick disinfection before they use it. And then when they give it back, so people maintain the 1.5 meter distance when they're exchanging, and so it hasn't stopped anything during COVID after we put that in place. What about you, Ian?
Yeah, well, it was interesting, because we obviously hadn't launched when COVID started, and we've launched just as Bendigo's coming out the other end, hopefully. But what we had was hundreds of emails and phone calls from people around Australia saying, when are you ready? Because we want to use Villages for community mutual aid projects. So, you know, we've got a socially isolating young parent. We want to organise a cooking roster. We've got an older person who's been by themselves and they're worried about COVID. Can we do their shopping for them? You know, and Villages, you know, we actually went with our marketing and engagement. We went away from sharing and more towards, you can use the platform for mutual aid. So the sharing part is still there, and people are just getting their heads around how that works because it's only been launched a week and a half. But the mutual aid stuff has become really important. How can we, connect with the neighbours online to make sure that everyone's okay and to look after each other? So that's just another part of what Villages is about. But it's been really interesting, that shift in the last 6 months.
Great. Well, thank you so much, you three. It's been fascinating to hear what you're all up to and how you're contributing to the new economy and challenging the current systems in place so that we can have a livable future. So thank you. Big round of applause for the three of you. And so we're going into lunch now. So we have 1 hour break, and then, we'd have to check the program. I think it might be one main session, but please check your program. Kicking back off at 1 p.m. Daylight savings time. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Nice to meet you guys, Ian and Sarah.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Rhiannon.
Thanks. See you later.
Thanks. Have a nice day.